Ready? Let's hit it. Ready?
Yes.
Antoinette? Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, Mihai, it's a true delight to be part of this wonderful event this morning and see so many of you in person after so long COVID days. Yesterday, when I was preparing the session, I was thinking, why is it that we've all decided to come here? What is it that unites us all? And as Perry already said, it must be that we care a lot about people, right? HR is all about people, isn't it? Well, here's the twist. When Antoinette and I started to look at the data, we didn't really see that. So as we promised to Mihai, we want to kick off this delightful conference with a gentle and friendly provocation. We will suggest that the future of work is looking increasingly bleak because HR is looking increasingly stuck.
But let us start from the beginning. Over recent years, we have witnessed an explosion of new roles proposed for HR. And I mean, wow, look at this. We've been truly inventing new positions. Can you spot some outlandish ones? And did you know 4 out of the top 5 new job roles on the rise in 2023 belong to HR? There was one outlier, though, a truck driver. And yet, despite this creativity, genuine transformation seems to be extremely rare. So our hypothesis, all this variety masks a deep and underexplored identity crisis. We suspect that as a function, HR has willingly surrendered to the bottom line. And today, we'll try to show you why.
But who are we to make such bold and outrageous claims? And why should you listen to us over the myriad others who are promising you human resource paradise? Well, first of all, we're not here to sell you anything. Secondly, we do care a lot about HR, but most importantly, both Antoinette and I have spent the bulk of our careers trying to figure out how to make organizations better. And our credentials are on the slide, as you can see, but in a nutshell, HR is going to take up her role as an HR expert today, whilst I'll be trying to draw from my experience in transformation and leadership.
So, together, over the next 20 minutes, we aim to do 2 things. Firstly, we want to share with you a short retrospective of HR across its history. In an area where the noise of social media tends to crowd out critical analysis, we want to dig a little bit deeper. And in the second part, we want to explore how HR can free itself from what we suggest is a deliberate stagnation. We firmly believe it's possible to change, but there are no simple fixes. Change demands substantial investment, determination, and above all, a willingness to face ourselves. It will need courageous people, which I'm sure a lot of you here are sitting in the audience. So, are you ready to come on that journey with us together?
Yeah. So, let's kick things off with a simple but very important question. Why is it that each of you venture into HR? And let's make it more than an icebreaker. I think it's a good opportunity, as Perry said, for us to start connecting. So what we would love you to do in the next 3 minutes, and there's a little bar which is running out on the slide, is to talk to your left neighbor, or if you don't have one, in groups of 3.
Well, she has a left neighbor.
Maybe just briefly introduce yourselves, and then what are the top 1, 2, 3 reasons that have convinced you to step into the wonderful world of HR? Are you ready? Left neighbor, groups of 3, what made you come into this world? And the clock starts now. And the clock stops now. Can I have everybody back? Marvelous! What a buzz! We're getting awake. That's wonderful. Now, keep your conversation in mind. What were the 2, 3 reasons why you joined on that very first day, on that very first job, when you stepped into this wonderful world of HR? And let's look at some research. Antoinette.
Yeah, certainly. Let's refine it a bit. Indeed, our research shows many reasons why individuals join HR. But 3 motivations consistently stand out. Passion for people, a commitment to defending workers' rights, and a pragmatic drive to seek viable solutions when workplace conflicts arise. So just let me have a look with you showing hands. Does that resonate a little bit with the discussions you had? Okay.
Yeah, about 60%. That's fantastic, but of course now comes, you already knew it, now comes the pivotal question. Considering these goals, how successful do you reckon HR has been? So let's have a show of hands. And on a scale of 10, use your fingers. What's your personal score for HR accomplishing its mission? One, maybe not this finger. One finger is, we totally missed the mark. 5 fingers is, moderate success. And 10 fingers is a total triumph. So that's not worth a laugh, is it, Perry? Anyway, so ready to cast your votes? 1 to 10 fingers in the air. Let's see what you think. How successful have we all been? Perry, can you help? What's the average?
Okay.
5 to 6? 5 to 6? Anyone objecting? 5 to 6. Okay. Well, Antoinette, what does the research suggest?
Sorry, the answer is a bit complicated. A lot of it depends, as we'll hear in a second, on circumstances. However, as you can already spot, across the surveys we looked at 3 points which crucially stand out. Sadly, HR by now is the least trusted function in the organization, except maybe among executives, but then they aren't convinced that HR contributes significantly to the bottom line. So, in many cases, HR is perceived as ineffective in addressing organizational tensions, let alone deliver reliable results. And many wouldn't even recognize us at the water cooler. And when it comes to employee welfare, the reality is disheartening. Most workers have been losing out. So to put it into scientific slang, as I would usually say, on average, we did not do very well.
In scientific slang, on average, we did not do very well. Okay, now, but that's a little bit puzzling, isn't it? Because we all claim to cherish people, and we're sitting here fully engaged. So the perception of HR doesn't seem to resonate with what we believe HR does, Antoinette. What is driving that disconnect?
Well, indeed, that's the multi-million-dollar question. And we first went through a lot of popular HR magazine, and here's what came out. It wasn't us. HR is innocent, we swear. It's the line managers who gave us a hard time. It's the vendors who can't run the system. It's the workers, they don't have a growth mindset. And don't get us even started on those Gen Z folks who just don't want to work. In a nutshell, change is impossible because everybody around us is standing still. But somehow that's a tad too easy, isn't it? So we took out our shovels and dug a little bit deeper. Without burying you with a lot of data, we suggest HR has essentially navigated 4 distinct phases across the last century. Firstly, paternalism. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, HR emerged to support early industrialists and family patriarchs striving for better health and working conditions in their factories. Secondly, power. Amid deteriorating work conditions and increasing unionization, HR pivoted to manage industrial power relations, ensuring orderly production. Third, process. Post-World War II, HR expanded rapidly to facilitate ever larger scale business with professional selection, training, and management. Shortly afterwards, when social democracy demanded greater worker protection, the human relation movements emerged, seeking to balance performance and well-being. We know that one. And finally, profit. As neoliberalism and global corporate expansion surged in the 80s, HR enthusiastically embraced high-performance culture and profit narrative. So, by and large, it seems HR has readily conformed itself with all the trends in the evolution of modern capitalism, starting undoubtedly with a very strong focus on humanistic values. It gradually drifted with the currents toward ever greater instrumentalization. So that's a paradox, isn't it? We all learned that culture change is rooted in those underlying values and assumptions below the surface. So if HR had strongly humanistic values, how did it drift off course?
How did it drift off course? Well, unfortunately, it turns out that the fashionable iceberg model is as popular as it is simplistic. So it's time to upgrade our toolkit. Out goes shine, Edgar, and in comes complexity. Without diving deep into the details, you can, by the way, find all the details and references on our website. Let me share a point from the operational coalface. As it happens in complex business environments, when we start to dive beneath that surface, we very seldom find a neatly ordered set of assumptions and values that we can plug into some regression analysis or bake into some culture change program to create the future. Conversely, what we find, and I'm sure many of you have realized that, is the water is often pretty murky and dark, and we're facing dangerous sharks and treacherous currents. Or in more technical speak, within complex social systems, we encounter three essential entities: people, culture, and social structures, and each has its unique powers. And their combined interactions generate complex mechanisms that might translate into certain conditions that we might detect above the waterline. So it's all a little bit more complex than the iceberg model. But what does that mean for HR? Well, very simply put, it means that we can't just pick and choose our roles in complex social systems. There's no action without context. And roles often predate us, and our character and identity emerge dynamically from the interplay between dominant narratives, our evolving agency in the middle there, and relational dynamics. And this also implies, by the way, and this is important, that the highly popular and populist idea that we can drive change by just changing our mindsets is utterly simplistic. It takes evolution of all these elements under the waterline in a system in order to generate sustainable transformation. Plus, speaking from experience, and again, I know many of you are in the same place, it sometimes takes a lot of courage to face those lurking sharks of orthodoxy and tradition.
So maybe we could say that HR was indeed a victim of circumstance. Because right from its inception, HR occupied what is called a marginal leadership position. That's a nice way for saying that despite our relentless proclamation that people are at the heart of our business, HR had very little power. Its profession was loose, its authorization uncertain, and its influence limited, all of which sparked an existential anxiety and a deep desire to carve out a role that was both recognized and effective. Initially, that wasn't a big issue until the context shifted towards massive instrumentalization, because then HR got trapped by those powerful currents below the surface. In order to wield influence within business, HR basically had to justify its existence by instrumentalizing itself. And that's when the idea of the business partner discourse was born, which seemed a truly brilliant idea at the time. And all the research shows HR's extraordinary effort to ascend to strategic significance over the past 3 decades. But truth to be told, it always was, in essence, a dangerous game of swimming with sharks. And unfortunately, HR heroically failed.
And unfortunately, HR heroically failed. Why? Because instead of getting closer to the people that it wanted to and aimed to serve, HR found itself disconnected from the very individuals. The imprudent separation between the strategic advice and the day-to-day people operations led to HR management by remote control. And you need to look at the numbers. We're world class here as well. An absolutely booming HR outsourcing market and continuing depersonalization. And this is why HR often goes unrecognized in those organizational corridors. And of course, can I say this? Where's Mihai? I need to say this. Vendors absolutely loved it. And there's no coincidence whatsoever that today 90% of HR research are offered by suppliers. And instead of championing labor rights, HR often operated as a subsidiary of the finance department. Its original humanism faded away very quickly when the emphasis shifted towards numbers and KPIs and performance-based pay and all those relentless business cases that we created to support human capitalism. And finally, HR inadvertently undermined its own capacity to tackle real-world issues because the free-tier model, Dave isn't here yet, right? The free-tier model, anyone? And the excessive outsourcing gradually chipped away HR's core competencies and its flexibility, both eroding its unique knowledge and its capacity to customize its services across lots and lots of new vendors. And it also, on the way, lost some valuable allies.
So let's keep on asking ourselves during the sessions over the next 2 days, are we prioritizing humanism or is it instrumentalism in the end? But of course, you might counter, hold on a second, that's too pessimistic. What about COVID? Didn't the whole world embrace human-centric values, purpose-led organization, that's for sure, and a global drive for planetary well-being? Well, that's true, or better, that's truly what people claimed, because unfortunately, it wasn't necessarily what they did. Sure, a few solar panels went up on head office, chief purpose officers were appointed, and CEO bonuses were tied to rather meaningless ESG targets. And lots of business became excellent in green, white, and blue washing. And we created a $1.5 trillion well-being market, mostly selling quick fixes. But substantive change was still stunningly absent. And as for HR, that initial revival of humanism was swiftly overshadowed by her focus on the technicalities of remote working processes, agility, and performance. Once the COVID tech bubble subsided and vendors stopped celebrating, we even saw thousands of layoffs to catapult stock markets to all-time highs. And we continue to endorse and even accelerate a plethora of toxic practices that are neither ethically nor scientifically sound, I'm sorry to say. And this really is not to discount the genuine efforts of numerous organizations, particularly smaller ones, and of wonderful colleagues who every day seek to make a positive difference. Rather, it's an urgent recognition that our businesses still too often cause human suffering and squander human potential. We believe that HR has not yet faced that critical self-reflection necessary to keep those bays at bay. This is, by the way, what Matt Alverson calls functional stupidity. So lots of highly intelligent people ending up remarkably do foolish things. So let's be honest. Unless we shift, the future will only amplify the troubles for our people, and HR might quickly become obsolete.
Which brings us to the second and hopefully brighter part of our little journey. What can we do? Where do we lead from here? And how can we get to this, where's Mihai? The new HR Horizon, the conference theme that we have here, which says, quote unquote, the well-being of individuals and the nurturing of humane workplaces have taken center stage. Is it even possible? Well, yes, we think, but guys, it's not gonna be easy. And our first step has to be to gain clarity on where exactly we want to lead our organizations. Because it's not what is the future of work, which is descriptive, but what should the work of the future be? And there are so many ideas and proposals and leadership models scattered all across cyberspace that frankly, I don't know you, but I find it has become very, very difficult to know what to believe in. And that's why 2 years ago, Antoinette and I embarked on a journey to figure out what exactly makes organizations good. And one thing became immediately evident, which is most of what's being proposed as new these days remains entrenched in an instrumentalist paradigm. Concepts like net zero, net positive, sustainability, ESG, SDG, you name it. They center around basically doing less harm, whilst maintaining the status quo. But reducing bureaucracy or offsetting CO2 emissions just isn't the same as doing good. Because doing good is about who we are and how to bring to life the best in ourselves at and through work.
So our simple idea is that we need to re-embed our organizations as the vital link between a fulfilling life and a prosperous society. Organizations attain excellence, firstly, by enabling people to develop internally, and secondly, by contributing collectively to good economy and society. And let's be clear, we are not arguing against organizations being more efficient, customer-centric, and adaptive, but we do suggest that to do it for a different purpose. Profit is not an end in itself, but must serve to enable social flourishing and justice on a larger scale. But that clearly takes more than new narrative or polished purpose statements. Firstly, as we have seen, we must cultivate all those elements below the organizational surface, from the underlying culture and foundations, language, symbols, metrics, and policies, to the structural frameworks, routines, and systems, and the holistic development of individuals and communities.
So let's get a bit more complex, and that's why we think it's time for a new model to think about organizations. In our work, we are emphasizing the intentional development of what we call virtuous social practice, and we've termed it micro-organizations, alongside the refinement of corporate institutions and governance, which we frame as the corporation. And of course, people. But when it comes to people, our focus lies not just on competencies, but wisdom, virtues, and character. But it's not just about each component, it's also about the connection between them, because truly human-centric organizations need to nurture the moral environment that combines the care, the integrity, the compassion of all the people, together with a commitment towards what is a mutual elevation for that greater good that Antoinette mentioned. And to do so, I think we must continue to evolve the organizational design, striking a more progressive balance between the local affordances for those micro-organizations, individual growth, and the need to foster shared learning and a coherent external value proposition. And frankly, I mean, look at the slides. That's quite difficult. And by the way, that's what all our research shows. We can clearly see that with growing scale, most of the corporations turn instrumental. And to counter this, again, our best idea for the moment is that we must overlay what is a predominantly financial governance of the firm with disciplines that enable collective reflection and participation. And the best metaphor we could come up with is to think about it like a living constitution, an organizational constitution that everybody owns. And for example, to give you a practical example, at ING, HR, by the way, HR was sponsoring what we called a global leadership council of all the people who were kind of having the organizational transformation on their shoulders to steer the ongoing transformation. And if you think about it, the ultimate goal is to first connect those people and structures and cultures, thus nurturing the wisdom and the identity and the character of the institution, whilst at the same time enabling something like a reflective equilibrium that continually actualizes the potential of the organization under the waterline to create that social flourishing above the waterline.
Or to put it more simply, we must learn to care and to be intentional about our organizational moral climate, just as we learn to care for the environmental climate. But how does this all translate into action? Firstly, we must focus more on our people. This involves character-based selection and promotion, personalized development plans, and a strict adherence to that no asshole rule.
Did I hear no asshole? Can you
Sorry? As a professor, I'm allowed to say that.
Professor, where are you going?
Secondly, we need to much more deliberately evolve management structures and practices to craft that space for mutual growth and creativity. And thirdly, we must revise corporate governance structures and institutions like success measures, reward and recognition policies, or team affordances to embed virtuous principle and actively develop and foster positive impact. The key here is to evolve people and organizational practices holistically across various levels, avoiding fragmentation through specializations and vendors. Sorry, the vendors again.
But, and there's always a but, isn't it? We call it the transformation law number 1. What we've experienced, and maybe you've seen that yourselves, is that the maturity of an organization can never exceed the maturity of its most senior leaders. Hence, we must also deliberately develop leadership. And there's a lot to do. I saw a recent survey by the CMI, the Chartered Management Institute, where they claim that over 50% of senior leaders lack professional qualifications. And over 52% of new leaders, the people that we lift from team positions into management roles, they fail within the first year. But I think there can be no doubt, if we're honest, that HR is in a great position, based on all of this, to foster positive transformation, because it holds many critical leaders, both inside HR and across the wider business when it comes to the policies and structures and success metrics. And we've gathered some initial ideas that you can see the complex slide on the left, but we would love to hear from you. So if any of you folks is willing to get up very early tomorrow morning at 7:45, together with Michele Zanini, Michele is here somewhere in the back, sitting there, we'll be trying to host a little space where we will not talk much like today, but we will ask everybody to share their own thoughts and share best practice and maybe some exemplars or some difficulties that you've encountered. And we will make all those outputs available for everybody here at our website on hr.leadershipsociety.world. But I want to go back to this point on leadership, because frankly, I think this brings us straight back to the beginning of our conversation. HR clearly possesses some power, but it might be unwilling or unable to wield it effectively. So frankly, I don't know you, but which of the many roles that we saw at the beginning should HR assume to catalyze this positive change? And we think that in essence, it all boils down to only 3 viable options. A, you ignore what we've told you and stick to that conventional business partner narrative. And frankly, I want to be honest, and sorry if someone thinks differently, but I think this encompasses most of the fashionable trends from AI to DI. B, you could cultivate HR's role as something that we've called an excellence broker. And this could mean, for example, empowering selected good leaders that you know and trust across the organizations to systematically create ripple effects. And this could demand, for example, more focus on learning and development and change management and the radical empowerment of these virtuous teams like cells in the organization. Think it maybe a little bit like an undercover mission, right, where you are trying to eliminate the barriers for excellence of those teams from the bottom up, one team at a time, until hopefully the whole organization shifts. Or thirdly, for the courageous, where feasible, HR could step up in its position in the boardroom to actively steer the organization towards such a new and more humanistic narrative. And frankly, we think that would require a human-centric overhaul of all the HR policies and processes, which in many cases haven't been looked at from an ethical human standpoint over years. And of course, the development of governance and organizational design, as Antoinette already mentioned, and, sorry to say that, a meticulous vetting process for all the leaders. Not only on competence, not only on how much sales they generated, but on character.
So, here's the thing. If we all choose option A, we might as well wrap up this conference now, because we'd be anchoring HR's future exactly where we stand today. We can discuss well-being, D&Y, talent, until the cows come home, but nothing will really change substantially. So why don't we do a quick poll amongst friends and colleagues and find out, whom do you aim to serve with your leadership in the coming years? Employees, shareholders, the greater good, or all of them? And what risk are you personally ready to face? 3 choices: partner, broker, or leader. Are you ready to vote? Because I'm going to ask you for a show of hands. So, who is firmly committed to the business partner model and intends to remain there? Oh.
Liars!
That's called social desirability bias.
I'm the only one.
Okay. And who's upping their game, actively promoting the right people and structures? Okay.
Very nice, guys.
And finally, who's diving straight into the boardroom to lead from the front?
Roaring, we at least need, oh my God, I was saying we need one, but there are more. Wonderful.
So I think the rest picked some roles from the first slide.
Wow, that's intriguing, isn't it? But I love it, guys. I really love it. Miha, you have invited the right people to this conference. But perhaps that wasn't the right question, because maybe the real challenge is how we're not that many, right? How we collectively can create the conditions for a systematic shift in the role of HR across as many organizations as possible. And this won't be easy, because if you remember, any marginal leader in any type of complex system will always face those underlying currents of the instrumentalist immune systems of traditional organizations. And this leads us straight to the end of our little journey and our call for action. Because we've talked about this at length, and the best idea that we've come up with is the following. So firstly, it is our firm belief that the time is truly ripe for a better future of work. The urgency of climate change, I think, has rattled our conscience. The narratives, if you look at what is bubbling up on the internet, on social media, the narratives are fast changing and challenging the status quo. And people I talk to, leaders are increasingly willing to step up. But I think in order to succeed, HR practitioners require more than what you've just displayed, which is moral courage. They need competence, they need determination, they need wisdom to lead against the odds. And they must also collaboratively develop some new practices to lead such good organizations, develop such good organizations. But personally, I think many of such leaders are lonely. And I think, above all, they must feel supported by peers like you in asking those important and often inconvenient questions. And dare to proudly uphold that spirit of humanity and maintain that dual loyalty, both to the organization and to HR as a profession. And that's why we believe we must invest heavily in HR as a profession. And I think every senior HR leader should make it a personal commitment to maintain a professional mandate. But you might rightly say, well, if we are really serious about creating a better future of work, that's not enough. It goes far beyond HR. We need all senior leaders to step up, right? As we've seen, transformation law number 1. And we do agree. And that's why today we are inaugurating, as a prototype, a new research initiative aimed at professionalizing leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, it's our pleasure to launch together with you what we have called the Global Society for Good Leadership. And it is a, what is it called, Antoinette? An engaged scholarship, is that right? Yeah. Engaged scholarship, I've learned a new term. Initiative between academia, so we get the best of research, and practice, so we get the best of practice. And our objective is to stimulate a humanistic ethos for good leadership and to systematically support such marginal leaders who have the courage to stand up across all functions with continual development, a strong community, and our collective best practices.
So why are we launching the society today? Because such a project cannot succeed without the partnership of HR. We must insist together on the advancement of better leadership within, but also across organizations. Because let's face it, the challenge that society encounters today cannot be resolved by any single company alone. But perhaps by forging a broader coalition of leaders committed to the highest potential of people and organizations, we stand a tiny little chance to foster the necessary shift in the character of business to defy an increasingly dehumanized financial capitalism that encroaches upon our enterprises.
Because, coming to the end, having spent my days and life in 30 years in leadership position, I think the simple truth is, excellence in business is not just about what we produce. And it certainly is not just about how much money we make. But ultimately, it is about who we become. Our work is always also a mirror image of ourselves. It can create boundless joy or bottomless sorrow. Therefore, colleagues and friends, what you do in your roles, in your work, in your jobs, and what we do together here to evolve the profession of HR, it matters.
So with that, thank you very much, and we hope to see you tomorrow in the morning, early morning. The presentation, references, and resources are available on our website at hr.leadership.world. And if you want to take one closing thought from our session, remember, we did not go into HR because we wanted to rule. We all got into HR because we truly cared for our people. The future of work? It's already here. Let's not waste it. And have a great conference, everybody.
Thank you very much.